12 o'clock. So
good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And all of you know that this biggest festival of the Bengali calendar that started since yesterday and mostly going on virtual mode now. And the reason is also very clear, needless to say, that for this current pandemic situation that started in January this year and continued, though it is slightly in downward mode at this moment, and all of us are careful so that there is no resurgence again or revival, regrowth, what you say. So because of that, all are going in a virtual mode, and I wish you have a pleasant and good days ahead of after this festival. The blessings of Ma Durga will always be there. Now, what we have been observing during the last few months, that because of this pandemic, so mostly all the economies of across the globe are affected, and Southeast Asian countries are also not out of this calamities. And as it happens during any natural calamity or any disasters, the government policies are taken to respond this. Apart from the government policies, NGOs and people, all of them and different other organizations, they are involved to respond and minimize the impact of those calamities. Now, what are the basic impacts? So you see the loss of life and livelihood across this, from agriculture to industries, transport, business, and tourism, which is one of the fastest growing industries in the past 1.5 decades, that has gone down. Especially in India, we have estimated that it has gone back to 2 decades, the level of that. Unemployment level reached of last 5 decades highest in India, more than 9%. It is estimate, but it will be much more, and the informal sector is worstly affected that we have seen. So the other things that regional price imbalances in several other meetings we have told, and so questions on what is the level of lockdown imposed, what are the modes, whether it could be implemented in a different way. And in South Asia, different countries are following different way of the lockdown and policies to address this problem of the pandemic. Now, if we look at the another situation about the climate change or the weather patterns, we have seen some sudden changes and erratic situations. Though in the beginning of the lockdown, some of the experts were telling that no, it helped in improving the quality of the ambient environment or weather pattern, as from far distant, the hilltops, were visible, which we could not imagine in last 10 to 15 years. That is, from Delhi also you could see the peaks of some of the pristine Himalayan peaks that was not visible because of the smog, fog, and other clouds, which are because of the anthropogenic activities of the human being for industrial production, effluents, or the air pollutions, and many more. But again, recently what we see, because people blame it to the burning of the fossil fuels or what you call the crop residues in Punjab, Haryana, that side. And so some smogs are started coming towards the Delhi side. And again, the environmental quality started deteriorating a little. So even if there is not much increase in the transport and communication. So that is, transport and communication was supposed to be the one issue related to the environmental damage, but not the sole. There are some other factors, and so debates are going on this. So apart from the academic, industrial front, agriculture, and others, as I said, all have been affected. And time to time, since independence of all these countries, what we have seen, that government has taken various steps and policies to revive and protect its own industries in the competition of the world, to face the stiff competition, how to regroom and how to develop the country. For agriculture, also several policies taken to improve the productivity, to remove the disguised unemployment, which is see some amount of the increase in the recent time because of the returnees from the metros of the people who are increasingly involved in the agriculture despite having not much increase in the land, cultivable land. So again, this guy's unemployment increase, which needed some more policy changes, and governments are trying to do like that to improve the growth or revive from its deceleration process. So at this backdrop, what we call this IMPRI's that South Asian Studies Center that they have started is discussion series, of which we already held one discussion delivered by Professor Elias Hossain of Rajshahi University, Bangladesh, and only in the last week, in regard to the agriculture and rural development and the policies undertaken by the government of Bangladesh in connection with some NGOs, their implementation of the microcredit system, and step by steps from pre-independence to the present days, how they are tackling to have some inclusive growth and welfare of all the individuals across the whole countries. So that's discussions we have held, and today we will have another discussion on this nationally determined contributions to climate change in Sri Lanka, will be delivered by Professor Rekha Nianthi from the University of Peradeniya. So these discussions is basically, there is an objective to have some ideas and to explore the policies undertaken by the governments in the South Asian countries like India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Maldives, even Myanmar, whatever possible, and to see what are the loopholes in the policies, how they contributed to the development, and whether there is a need and in what way this can be coordinated within the country and across the countries, or international coordinations, how can it be made in order to achieve the goals in different fronts. So whether it is in the tourism sector survival, whether it is a balanced growth of the trade, and accordingly the welfare, or to have a resilient economy to respond to the to any disasters, the mechanism. So mostly all these things, I hope that will bring out some policy suggestions that may be put forward to the governments across these countries, so that they can come forward to have some joint mechanism wherever possible. Now, regarding Professor Rekha Nianthi, I know her since quite a few years, more than a decade, you can say. So, because she was since she was doing her PhD in the Northeastern Hill University, so we became acquainted, and after that, we are in constant in touch, and I see her very remarkable researches that she is engaged in, and her contribution is notable in this field. So at present, she is a professor of geography in the University of Peradeniya, Sri Lanka. She did her MSc in AIT, Thailand, and Asian Institute of Technology. And after completion of PhD at NEHU, that is Northeastern Hill University, she did her postdoctoral work in Minho, Portugal, University of Minho. She was a visiting scholar in International Environmental and Disaster Management Lab, Kyoto University, Japan, and also a scholar at the Mink University, Germany. She is engaged in research on disaster management, climate-related issues, and disaster management and development. All these related issues she has been engaged in, though she is basically from a geography background. And she received the prestigious UGIT Excellency Award for her outstanding research in geography. Now she is also the coordinator of the University Network for Disaster Risk Reduction and Management in Indian Ocean and Review, UN4DRR, Erasmus, and capacity building for higher education. So today she will be speaking on nationally determined contributions to climate change in Sri Lanka. So with just a brief introduction about her, I request Professor Rekha to deliver her lecture. Now, platform is yours. Please start.
Yeah. So, thank you very much, Professor Arjun Kumar, Director of Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, and my friend, Professor Utpal K, for inviting me to give a special talk for this session. And also I must thank to Dr. Simi. Today I only came to know about you. So then my topic is actually the nationally determined contribution to climate change in Sri Lanka. So I will share my screen. So, okay, so actually this presentation is based on the NDC report, Nationally Determined Climate Change for Sri Lanka, Ministry of Mahaweli Development and Environment, Sri Lanka. So before going directly to the topic, I would like to share with you regarding my country's situation regarding climate, especially. I don't think maybe some of the participants, they have already visited, foreign participants, they have visited my country. So Sri Lanka is situated in Indian Ocean location. So you can see it is near to equator, northern hemisphere, and between 5 and 10 degree latitudes, and also climate of Sri Lanka is influencing by various factors, global factors as well as local factors. When I talk about the global factors, latitudes is one of the main factor, because throughout the year we get very good sun, solar radiation, and also air masses influencing to climate of Sri Lanka, especially trade winds. And we are in the low pressure belt also. And due to the large area of sea, heat also exchanging from the ocean currents. And as you are also close to us, we know we have 2 monsoon season. I think Indians calls it is as a summer monsoon. We are calling southwest monsoon, and also northeast monsoon affecting to climate of Sri Lanka. So the land and distribution of sea, because we are a very small country, around 65 square kilometers, and you can see where it is situated, and Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea, whenever originating low pressures, it is crossing Indian Ocean, and somehow it is not crossing Sri Lanka when it comes to the cyclone stage. Before that storm stage, it's turning again to North Indian Ocean. So, and locally factors, when we go to Sri Lanka, highest peak is 2,524 meters. So then we call it as a Central Highlands. So therefore, Central Highlands is one of the barrier for change in the rainfall amount in Sri Lanka. So therefore, local factors are also governing Sri Lanka climate. So coming to the 2014 report, the disaster risk reduction UNDRR 2019, our country population is only 20 million and GDP per capita contribute dollars 4,065. And according to the Human Development Index, Sri Lanka is in the position of 76, and we are moving to upper middle income level category. So climate, especially in the country, for rainfall, intertropical convergence zone, I think Indians, you know very well, it is crossing crossing the equator. Now it is over Sri Lanka this time, and convectional rain occur anytime, but to intermonsoon season, it is normally occurring. So easterly waves, I think Indians know very well easterly waves. Before coming cyclones, the first stage is the easterly waves. So that sometimes, even though not crossing Sri Lanka cyclones, very rarely, 1978, we had 1,000 people died. But apart from that, other kind of stages of cyclone giving a lot of troubles to Sri Lanka climate. So if I move into Sri Lanka climate historical records, as India, like we are taking almost temperature and rainfall changes from 1961 to 1990, mean annual temperature in Sri Lanka increased by 0.2 Celsius degree, and also daytime maximum, mean daytime maximum temperature increased by 1 Celsius degree, and nighttime temperature also increase in trend having, so then 0.7 increase already nighttime temperature. And when we talk about the rainfall, we have different figures because of the central highlands. Some areas get increase in trends and some other areas get some decrease in trends. However, 144 millimeters decreased by when 1990 comes. So frequency and intensity of flood and drought, I think it is very similar to other South Asian countries, and sea level rise also happening in Sri Lanka now. So what are the projected changes, including like different scenarios like IPCC and NASA and different forecast scenarios say very clearly temperature will be increased by 0.8 to 2 Celsius degree in 2060. And all other kind of parameters like daily maximum and nighttime temperature, minimum temperature, all these things increase by 0.7. So then precipitation is, as I said earlier, extreme events are increasing now. So in Sri Lanka also, within short period of time, we get high intensity of rainfall. So, and flood is one of the very, very dangerous disaster in Sri Lanka, and also the drought. So cyclone frequency and intensity also increasing. I think Indians, you know, you professors, you know that it is increasing trends having in our country also with the other phenomena. So you can see the pictures like whenever flood take place, normally southwestern side district and areas get floods. And whenever northeast monsoon, you call winter monsoon, we get northeastern side flood. This is every year happening. So my question is actually whether this is because of actually heavy rainfall, or whether actually our country is having the management issues. I guess most of the things, more than maybe 75%, I say these are the management issues. Once we can say high rainfall occur, but when I observe all the drainage system and the river system, I think all got full of waste. So if we once clean all these things, I think this flood issue can be minimized rather than going for various mitigations actions. So this is one of my observation, and disaster occurrence in Sri Lanka up to 2018, you can see the contribution 58% from flood, and then following landslides, because central highlands of Sri Lanka, you can see the last map, central highland of Sri Lanka is prone to very risk areas. Already NBRO, National Building Research Organization, they have mapped all the risky areas, but my personal view is the land use planning and land use improper planning making induce this issue. I think these all things are very, very equal to other countries, I think, especially South Asian countries. So then you can see the reasonable amount of drought contribution also in Sri Lanka. So here you can see the storms track coming from Bengal Sea. The country mostly cross the north and northeastern side, but luckily still we are not getting high cyclones. Somehow it is turning again when it close to Sri Lanka. So another impact is storm surge in Sri Lanka. Recently we can hear this. Earlier we did not hear about the storm surge so much. You know, Bangladesh country already predicted so much of areas impacting due to the storm surge. So when you go to the drought risk map, it is very clear the dry zone area and the arid zone areas still very high drought hazard is occurring that side. So coming to the point, actually, even though we are having this type of impacts due to climate change or global warming, so our country, as a country, our total greenhouse gas emission represent less than 0.1%. I don't know, I'm not much aware of the other countries coming to my mind now. So then, but Sri Lanka contribution is 0.1. So, but Sri Lanka is highly vulnerable to climate change. That of course correct. So compared to global emission per capita, emission is also very less. So therefore, Sri Lanka government has taken various steps to control, mitigate the climate change in Sri Lanka. There are various policy documents. Like other countries, we have so many policy documents. I have pointed out only some documents here: National Adaptation Plan for Climate Change Impact in Sri Lanka and National Climate Change Policy, first document, and the second document, and State of National Climate Change 2010. So all these policy documents addressing very well to mitigate and adaptation to climate change in Sri Lanka context. So today my presentation, as I said, is based on Ministry of Mahali Development and Environment, Sri Lanka. It is the national focal point of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, that we everybody know what is this organization. So this is outcome of the 19th conference, COP19. We know about the Warsaw Agreement, Warsaw, Poland, 2013, United Nations Climate Change Conference. So as we are one of the party member, I think India also member of that, according to the Paris Agreement, we have to keep the global warming well below 2 Celsius degree. I think otherwise already predictions are given IPCC. So the impacts are very, very serious for all the countries, I think. So therefore, every country need to have very proper policy document and implementation procedure. So in Sri Lanka, when we implement this 2020 to 2030, this NDC policy, now already started this year, but same time need to identify the policy gaps. There are many policies, there are many institutions, and still we can identify the policy gaps. And also institutional gaps. Always when disaster take place, different institutions actually their responsibilities the questionable. When we give kind of early warning or kind of instruction, different institutions, they don't take the responsibility properly. So I think this is common to every South Asian countries. And the other point is human technical capacity we need to improve. Otherwise, we cannot go for this all the targets. And also, very big issue is financial and technical supports. Without these things, it is very difficult to implement NDC 2020. So business as usual 2010 scenario. So our target period is 2021 to 2030. So in this document, there are five main, consist of 5 areas. I think these things are common to many other countries, but Sri Lanka government, we identified these 5 areas. What? Mitigation. So the reducing the greenhouse gas emissions sector-wise, because in Sri Lanka, we have sectors, energy sector, transportation, industry, waste, and forestry. So, so we need to have this sector-wise sub-planning for implementing this NDC. So then adaptation is another sector. We know human health is now adaptation. Now we are actually adapting for the COVID-19. So now this is the very good example, I think. Still we are in the during the disaster, because disaster we have 3 categories: before disaster, during disaster, and after disaster. Still we have not come to the after disaster. So then food security, agriculture, livestock and fisheries, and water and irrigation, coastal, biodiversity, urban infrastructure, especially human settlement, and tourism. All those things we need to have separate adaptation policies and implementation. So the third one is loss and damage. Actually, so far we have talked about the mitigation and adaptation, but after the Warsaw International Conference mechanisms, I remember many countries, developing countries, they gave their voice to implement loss and damage, because most of the developing countries are the vulnerable people because of the extreme weather events. But I don't know this loss and damage, how we are going to implement. It is again, maybe we have to have our local mechanisms to give this insurance or whatever loss and damage from the climate change and disasters. So then means of implementation is another category area need for this. As I said earlier, external support from for the finance and technology development and capacity building. So these things are very, very important when we go for the policy documents, policy implementation stage. So, and also ambitious, I already explained what are the Sri Lanka government ambitious is. So reduction of greenhouse gas emission and efforts for economic growth, whatever we do for all those things for the economic growth of the country and protect the environment, global environment. So then mitigation approaches and increase in adaptation and loss and damage, and also locally appropriate institutional mechanisms we need. So coming to the NDC mitigation strategies for greenhouse gas emissions, now energy, we have the first, as Professor Utpal mentioned earlier before our discussion. So energy sector and transportation sector are very, very important when we talk about the greenhouse gas emission. And the third one, industry and forest and waste. In our country also, I think energy and transportation sector are very, very important. Our policy document is expected to reduce by 20% of energy sector, and also other sectors, transport, industry and forest and waste, 10% when 2030 comes. So I will discuss here only energy and transport sector from mitigation strategies. I am not going to talk adaptation and all. So for coming to the energy sector, electricity generation of Sri Lanka has realized almost 100 electrification need for national grid. So total power generation capacities of a country 3,888 megawatts, but it's contribute from coal power 23%, oil thermal power 29%, and renewable energy 48%. So from the renewable energy contribution, hydro is 74%, small hydro 18%, and solar and wind small amount. So currently we use 50% renewable energy resources. So in this policy document, expected to increase this contribution for the sake of the world, decreasing the greenhouse gas emissions. So you can see the overall annual demand is increased by 4%, and energy sector has been increasing now because of the petroleum-based fuel for energy generation. So this is the main issue now. So energy sector, 20% of greenhouse gas emissions reduction targeting NDC. So energy sector, how we are targeting energy sector to reduce greenhouse gases. So establishment of large scale wind power plants, at least more than 500 megawatts, and solar power plants and biomass power plants and mini hydro power plants. These are the policy things that we are going to implement for as a mitigation action for energy sector. And demand side management, it is already appointed presidential task force for this kind of implementation mechanisms. And energy related policies increase share of renewable energy is we need to encourage from the existing percentage, it is around 50. So another 50% we need to fulfill that, because Sri Lanka is near to equator, and your country also same. Most of the countries are same. But the problem is this much solar energy, I don't know why we cannot encourage. So this is a question for us when we teach also for our students, because it's enough solar power, and wind also we have, but still we are depending on the fossil fuel energy. This is a very questionable things that we can discuss actually. So then converting the fuel oil-based power plants to renewable energy. So liquid natural gas, so like LNG for thermal power generation, place of solid and liquid petroleum fuels. That these are the options that we can actually implement. So therefore, Sri Lanka has taken strong initiative to eliminate CO2 power plants. It's around capacity 4,700 megawatts from the national electricity system by 2030. 2030. I don't know whether this will be possible, but this is the policy that going to implement in Sri Lanka. So current intervention in renewable energy generation include hydropower plants as Umaya project. It is expecting to have much megawatts, and small hydropower plant around 500 megawatts, and wind park now identified Manor Island is one of the very good place for making generating wind power actually. So the northern areas also same. Northern area of Sri Lanka is having high potential, approximately 300 megawatts wind power energy to implement Wallimunai wind farm, Jaffna Lagoon. So now I can brief about the transport sector. Transport sector is one of the major greenhouse gas emitting source in Sri Lanka, because current vehicle is split in approximately 5 million, and caused by the increase of three-wheelers and two-wheelers. I think your country also same. Most of the countries tuk, 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 whatever we call three-wheelers and two-wheelers. So its contribution is very, very high. And also moving that public transportation mode to using private vehicles. So many private vehicles encouraging, not the public sector, but I am having experience with the Europe countries. So they have having very good public transportation. So they are not going by their vehicles for shopping and other kind of activities. Even the university professors, they are coming by just bicycle. How they are doing these things and why we cannot implement these things are the question. Maybe they are contributing lots for the greenhouse gas emissions to the atmosphere, but they are also taking mitigation action also. So then coming to the petroleum, the vehicles are mainly powered by imported petroleum oil and refined. About 70% of petroleum is consumed by transport sector in Sri Lanka. So the per capita petroleum consumption increased like anything from 1990s, per capita 50 liters. Now it is 150 when 2015 comes. I think it is maybe now nearly 200 liters. Now we are in 2020. So then you can see the emissions by sector wise. These are 2014 figures. Transportation 48 CO2 emissions, and electricity 41, and other sectors are very minimum. So high expenditure for importation of petroleum adversely affecting the country of our economy of the country. So it's a very burden kind of things to the economy also. So because total expenditure for petroleum import is about very high amount, 6% gross domestic products. So then greenhouse gas emission in transport sector can be reduced with several initiatives: low carbon transport system, increase in investment into public transport. We all are talking about these things, but when it comes to the implementation, somewhere it is breaking. So walking and cycling infrastructure. So most of the countries, Europe countries, they have separate pedestrians for cycling. So even our countries in the universities also, we cannot see that type of path for at least to the students to use. So modifying roads, railways, airports, ports, and minimize time and distance. These are the very quickly can do for as mitigations. So improving energy efficient of transport mode and vehicle technology is also very, very important. I think India maybe realized very well it, because India is technologically well recognized country but I don't know your countries how it's implementing, improving fuel economy of transport by enhancing vehicle and in engine performance. Actually now slowly we are also moving to some kind of initiatives, new technologies such as electrification of vehicle, reducing carbon intensity, substituting petroleum-based products with natural gas or biomethane, biofuels, electricity, hydrogen produce products, and harmony with the greenhouse gas mitigation option and related to transport policies with other national development programs, because our development programs institutional wise different. These are not having very good relationship each other. So coming to again transport sector, actually in the country encouraging 95 octane petrol, many educated those who know about this matter, they use 95 octane petrol, and I don't know whether it is kind of differences are there, 92 or 95, and we propose to destroy or reduce unproductive vehicles by 25%, and move into public transport and electrification of the railway system. Already started Bayangoda to Panadura area, Colombo side, Gampa side, and rehabilitation of railway lines, and transport master plan improving with the megapolis plan. So these are the actual policy the documents highlighting the points that we want to go as a country. And Gazette new emission standards is a document, legalize that. It is also very, very important. And vehicle emission test, actually we are doing for that. Even today, if we buy a car from a new car, zero mileage, tomorrow we need to test vehicle testing. So that is of course very good kind of activities the government initiated, and low emission vehicles and electrified three-wheelers. We need to move into that, and electric boats, buses and cars, and also reduce the traffic jam. So everywhere, Colombo now, Kandy also. We need 1 hour to go to Kandy now, especially weekends, days. So then canal transport system, like I have the experience with Thailand. So how they use their river system as a canal transport system. We all, maybe India, they have that, I don't know. So, but in Sri Lanka, we don't have still proper canal transport system, but now the government is going to implement this also. And centralized traffic management system is very, very important things. And also looking at the reduction of the aviation sector also. Actually, Sri Lanka or wherever, I think the world, the climate change cause mostly hydrometeorological. If we see the data contribution, hydrometeorological disasters are increasing. And now IPCC saying that we cannot change climate change and DRR. It should have very good link together, because most of the disasters are the impacts of climate change. So development approaches with disaster management strategies need to link together. Most of the developing countries, climate change and disaster have been ignored in development activities. I think that's what we are now suffering. So development activities separate and climate change impact separate. So we always disaster seen as an emergency response. So this is our culture. After disaster, flood, for example, so then we are giving something for people and evacuating 3-4 days. They are in the evacuation centers and giving something for them, and they are going to their houses again. So this is emergency response concept. Everyone is thinking this is the ideal things because we are not interconnected development activities with these emergency disasters. This is the main issue. Now, therefore, Sendai framework for action. I think everybody knows about this after the Hugo framework for action. Now, countries implementing Sendai framework for action, new approach, managing disaster risk rather than managing disasters. Every country need to move into this concept. Managing disaster, after disaster, we are managing. And not like that. Before that, we need to manage disasters. That we call DRR, disaster risk reduction. That's what IPCC want to highlight. The climate change and DRR are not separate things. So the relationship between disaster and development need to focus every country for if we are going for the climate change impact reduction. Because development can increase vulnerability. There are so many examples, my country and your country and all South Asian countries. Again, development can reduce vulnerability also. And disaster can set back the development also. Disaster can provide opportunities also. Therefore, climate change and disasters, and we cannot separate climate change and development initiatives need to link together. So that's what Sendai framework for action highlighting this time to implement 2015 to 2030, consider these two together. So in Sri Lanka, Sendai framework for action, we already started according to their targets. We are going to decrease annual average disaster mortality by 2030 and decrease the number of affected people and 50% reduction of direct disaster economic to gross domestic products, 75% reduction of disruption of education for children, and 80% district officers and local authorities have adopted disaster risk reduction strategies and planned by 2025. Not only the national government, the authorities of district and other authorities, they have to have this disaster risk reduction strategies. So enhance international cooperation by 50% and total population at risk is covered by multi-hazard early warning system. Because we have multi-hazard early warning system, we have to cover to the last mile people. So if we conduct this, implement this multi-hazard early warning. The tropical belt concept proposed by the Mahavali Development Authority in Sri Lanka. So recently I have participated for that. They are trying to organize one conference calling to all the tropical belt countries. I think this is the right time to get together Asian countries and tropical countries to have some kind of agreement as a region. I think as a region, we have all the resources, natural resources, manpower resources, technical resources, everything, culture and everything very, very close each other. So therefore, I think this is very good suggestions how we can implement our settlements and all other things will be discussed in this conference. If this panel also interested to be to this, we can jointly organize this one. I say Professor Utpal to think about this one for future. So I think with this note, I will stop my speech because I'm not going to talk about the adaptation. There are 5 sectors for adaptation, agriculture, food and all. It will make a very long discussion. So I will stop with this section. So thank you very much for inviting me for this session.
So thank you very much, Dr. Rekha, for your illuminating lecture on this nationally determined contributions to climate change in Sri Lanka. And you have rightly mentioned that not that current pandemic that we are facing, that this is also a disaster that our generation first time is facing. We never faced this type of disaster. Means we used to think it is a storm, flood, climate change related thing, all these. When climate change, environmental damage, last few decades, it has been going on. This discussions in different from at international level, and how to mitigate the solutions, how adaptations will be made. Different protocols are made. You can see from the UN level to the sub-regional level, country level, and at the regional and local level also. But the current situation is a little different, is due to pandemic anyway. So your address was basically on the climate change situations, but as it is an island country, your Sri Lanka. Apart from that, India's condition is one side is blocked by the high hill mountains, you can see. So another one type of climate within the same country and different region, we see different weather patterns. So their pattern of changing climate over the decades also or centuries is different. Western part is again in southeastern western part is the coastal region, so it is a different. So all the, and it is a small country also, Sri Lanka. So as all other island countries have, all sides you have the coast. Though it is a population is not very big, about 2 crore or slightly higher than that, 2.2 crore I think, and density is also over 300 per square kilometer. So that has one advantage obviously, and you have huge forest regions and that. But despite that, your country has been facing the flood, and which affects your overall effect of the natural calamities. Of that, about 60% that comes from the flood effect. And also your country is not out of any drought. Sometimes also you face drought, but these very nominal cases happen, very few. And landslides also, because wherever hilly regions, as we face in our northeastern part of India, or a northern part of the India, this landslides is a rampant when there is a heavy rain. You have also observed, you are in Shillong, so while traveling to Guwahati, many times road blockage because of the landslide when there is a continuous rain for 3-4 hours and severe like that. Epidemics, though you have mentioned, and transport accidents, that is another major cause. We don't call it a calamity, but we cannot ignore that. That is another thing. So in the greenhouse gas emissions, which contributes to the global warming, another thing that you see, and that leads to sometime people say that this present or erratic storm and tides, all these things are coming. So sea level rising, all these things. So that temperature, that 1% only contributed by the Sri Lanka. And when you give the disaggregated view, I saw that only your manufacturing contributes very small. In other cases, manufacturing is the major, especially the Western economies or European economies, because after the industrial revolution, it started only there. And that's why in every protocol, they come to a conclusion that how can we bring back to the temperature level to the pre-industrialization phase, or maybe marginally above that 1% or 2%. In some cases, it is whether pre-1990s situations we can bring. So I don't want to mention the different protocols and different conventions, how they structure. And your country also made some target that by 2030, how to replace all the coal-based energy sector. That as of now also, 46% your energy comes from the renewable energy. It's an admirable thing if we compare with all other countries. So that is one positive part. And if you are successful in replacing all the coal-based, and India as a government also has taken steps by 2030 to replace mostly the coal-based energy production system. That is also in all these South Asian countries, they have a common goal and objective. How they will do that is a different matter, because for that you need a technology, you need to switch over to the alternative sources. For that cost-effective generation of the renewable resources you must have, because it is still now these are mostly not cost-effective for the individuals to use at home or in the societies, whatever you say. Then the support system, demand supply mechanism, technological support. We want to have some renewable resource to utilize that. Suppose tidal power if we have to use. But mostly these countries are dependent on the technologies that is imported from the developed countries. So how to develop, if they join together, maybe it is possible to have better technology which will be helpful to supply to the from individuals also, not only to the industrial sector, transport sectors, etc. That may be possible in near future. We hope that. And in connection with global warming, as you have said, that mitigation, again those things come. For the mitigation means that financial support, technological support, how to reduce the impact, how to solve this problem, all these things. And adaptation, as in one of our study we had seen that how as this foothill of this northeastern part, that severely agriculture is affected because of the sudden floods and high hill rains, and these erratic situations also supported by our over time changes. That arguments come that Sreshta's IPCC studies we saw that in the last 100 years more than 1%, 1.2 to 1.6%, not percentage, degree of Celsius temperature rising has taken place, and that's why several glacial melts we see, and erratic that what you call not rainfall, but this flood occurrence, all this. So agriculture, how they are affected, seasonal pattern how changed. So the traditional crops, how they switch over to other type of crops, because as an individual they cannot solve the problem, but by choosing the type of crops they can avoid much of the damage. So adaptation there. So for not only agriculture, in all other sectors. So how this loss and damage how can be, and related to that, whether any government policies can be adopted. So what type of policies for that agriculture, whether Sri Lanka's government has been adopting over time for the adaptation, or influencing the general citizens to adopt a different mechanism. So that I expect from you anything to say, and for that whether any financial implications or subsidy mechanism or taxation mechanism as for that land qualities, acidity or productivity, long-term productivity loss in India. So people are influenced to use less nitrogenous fertilizers, so that subsidies are withdrawn, so that cost will be increased, and indirectly people will be forced to switch over to other organic type of cultivations and many such. So that is for the agricultural sector, but others also. So whether any government policies are there, that is one, and several disaster mechanisms from your regional level to the country level that you have mentioned. So how government has taken policies even to address the disasters, especially the cyclones mostly, that not only India, Sri Lanka also face time to time. Anyway, I don't want to make much this longer my as if like a paper. Only some small points I highlighted here. So I would like Arjun or Dr. Simi to speak something on this and have their own observations, or any panelists whoever are there. Kindly, Dr. Arjun.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Nianthi, for highlighting so many issues in such a less time. I really had few queries, which I think Professor Utpal has also raised. One is mostly on the economic dimensions, that sir is also saying that what are the levers or what are the tools of policy We also know that the crude oil is now not going to be more than $50 per barrel, like earlier recent times, 120, 150 also it raised. And the market of solar and other renewable, which is also saturating, and also the battery infrastructure, that thing is also, delaying. So what do you see in short term? Also, you have mentioned about many policies, 2020, 2030 policy also, which the department is and national government is taking there. What are the difficulties in terms of regulating and giving incentive or subsidy? What kind of levers are, as you know, you rightly mentioned that the tropical countries should adopt, and what should be the way forward for this? Kindly, you can, ma'am, choose to touch upon the issues which you like, or ma'am, you can reply now, or I can also invite Dr. Simi Mehta. She is also our environment expert. So to add anything, Dr. Simi?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Professor Rekha, for such a clear presentation and for outlining wonderfully the entire facet or the gamut of how Sri Lanka is actually undertaking efforts to move towards the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. Actually, my question to you is regarding the agricultural sector. All of us know that agriculture is one of the most polluting sectors, in the sense that it in the sense of the greenhouse gas emissions that it releases in the atmosphere. So I was curious to know what are the steps that are being taken by the Sri Lankan government to reduce or to adopt certain practices such as climate smart agriculture or climate resilient agriculture that would help in achieving the goals of the country's NDCs. This is my question to you. And another question we have from the audience, from Mr. Ranjit, who says that what are the major barriers to implement the eco-friendly power generation systems in Sri Lanka? So if you could briefly respond to these questions.
Okay, I think I have three questions. One is from Professor Arjun. As I mentioned, actually the issues when we implement the policies, one thing is policy gaps. So one policy says one thing and another policy says another thing. So that's what need to incorporate all the policies and need to find out what are the gaps and make one kind of solution for all those things. Another aspect is institutional gaps. So I don't know, so far we cannot solve this out, but maybe slowly it will come to that point. So institutions sometimes not taking responsibilities. One or two or three institutions taking the responsibilities, but finally, when things happen, no one is responsible. So the other point is financial and technical assistance. Without all those things in the policy documents, it is very, very difficult, I think, implementation when we go for the implementation. The last one is as business as usual. This is very, very important words, I mean, for all of us. This is repeating, but I hope this time at least our targets will fulfill with 2030 achievements. So this is the first question. I think I hope Professor Arjun got the answer. And the second questions came from Dr. Simi. I have not focused adaptation in this presentation. This is too long, but we in Sri Lanka, we have some adaptation sectors. From that, I think health sector and food security especially, and food security mean agriculture, livestock and fisheries, and water and irrigation, and coastal zone management, and biodiversity, and urban infrastructure, and human settlement and tourism. So these are the sectors that we are going to focus for adaptation. So I just briefed to Dr. Simi So for the agriculture adaptation, in this policy document, our one target is develop integrated pest management practices to minimize pest damage. Because of when drought comes, there are a lot of pest issues time to time. We never heard some names of the pest, and it is appearing time to time, like this corona. So this is changing all the time. So develop some tolerance, climate change, heat tolerance and varieties, drought and salt and flood varieties. So it is actually we have very good actually indigenous crop varieties, seeds. Still we can encourage those things. 60 days paddy seeds. In our historical time, our kings, they introduced 60 days mean 2 months for drought. So still we have these seeds, but somewhere it is, I don't know the system, what is wrong. So we cannot say all the time indigenous things are correct all the time, but some of the things still there that we can promote, we can encourage for the drought as a drought resistant seeds. So the other one is we have redemarcated in agroecological region maps, even though country is very small. So currently and future, we can recommend appropriate crop for different areas, because it's a micro level demarcation, country agroclimatic zones. Apart from main climatic zones, we have more than 49 agroecological zones. So then introducing water management is, this is from long time period, but it's not coming to the target level still. And rehabilitation of our cascade system. I think Sri Lanka also having that in other design, I don't know. So, but in Sri Lanka, more than 2,500 history, we are dependent on the cascade system. Cascade series mean, so one-to-one draw in the water and all dry zone people, when drought comes, we collect in water, storage, increase in the storage capacity. This is kind of rainwater harvesting. So still we have this system, we depend on that system. So we need to encourage now, new government, they are going to implement the whole country, this rehabilitation, because sedimentation level is very high in this tank system. So time to time, actually initiative done so many governments so far, but still, it to me it is not came to the target level. So these are the things actually for the agricultural sector adaptation and promote traditional knowledge. As I said, still traditional knowledge is very, very important. You know, Japan, Kyoto University, I have participated for many conferences. They are encouraging indigenous knowledge while they are promoting technical knowledge. You can go to the hyperbase of Japan, how they are collecting all over countries, their knowledge. Actually, we are very ashamed to say that, because our countries are having a lot of indigenous knowledge for everything, even for climate change, even for disaster risk reduction. So still we could not collect all those technology for use of us. So we have to think as Asian countries in future, if we are going to implement this tropical belt conference, to collect our indigenous knowledge for climate change and disaster management. So then dissemination knowledge of agriculture through extension. So already it is happening in Sri Lanka. Some of the NGOs also supporting and encouraging reforestation programs. And these are the things actually coming to the fishery sector, because fishery also comes to the agriculture sector. So fish barricades device for perennial reservoirs to prevent fish escaping. Sometimes fish escaping from one reservoir to the another ponds to another pond. So that we need to identify some technical device, fish barricades, to stop the fish. They going to the other sectors, escaping. So then also stocking of fish sperms for artificial breeding places. We need to encourage that sperms breeding places. So I remember one of the project when I participate for cascade system, we introduced fingerlings fishing for that tank. So before 2-3 years, they got their advantage like anything. I mean, project value past that their income. So this kind of new innovations, we have to think about that. And we have to convert existing open breeding facilities into indoor facilities, because like Thailand, so every house, they encourage everything at their home garden. So they have everything in their country. So every nutrition they get from their home garden. So rainwater harvesting is there. The animal husbandry is there, livestock are there, everything they depend on their houses from those kind of things. So then suitable species for identification, new reservoirs, and because we also have in large reservoirs, capacity development for fingerlings breedings, and develop temperature tolerant species and aquaculture, and promote mariculture kind of things. And capacity development, research and development, actually universities are doing a lot of research regarding these things, but sometimes those things are in only the research gate or Google Scholar. So these things are not coming to the actual implementation stage. So these are the things actually minimize the aquatic pollution, water scarcity in lagoons in inland, because wetlands are actually the flood controlling areas, wetlands. Many people, they don't know the importance of the wetlands. They are thinking that these are a barren land, waste land. Why these things like that? Some people asking like that. Actually, urban areas, flood is minimizing because of the wetlands. I think I'm not finger out to my country only. Many countries, all the wetlands are destroying like anything. So these are the things that even wetlands also having kind of some agricultural the crops are there. We can get so much of income from those things. So these are the things I always say. There are a lot of acts, lot of policies. I don't know who is the responsible for these things. Thank you. I think for 3 questions, you got the reasonable answers from my side.
So very nice that you have told about this wetlands at the end, that wetlands has a very important contributions to maintain the local ecological thing also, especially in the urban areas where the effluents will go, the local damages. So many of these things are absorbed by these wetlands as well, and this can be sustainably used for fisheries and others as well. But because of the changing land values, marketing systems, much of these wetlands across the cities in India also are converted to the homestead. You know, those are the things.
Yes.
The size of the wetlands shrink over the years. So that happened. And also you mentioned here that you have in Sri Lanka that 49 agroecological zones. 49 means within that small country of that in size, if we see 49 and it's an island country. So we are expecting that all sides of that island means which is a few kilometers on all sides from the sea level. So temperatures will be identical. Only that altitude differences that might cause something. but the huge variations in the agroecological thing. So that is another. So there must be the severe variation in the crop production, that is type of the crops or varieties that is being produced or cultivated, their soil structure. So much of these variations also in Sri Lanka is to me, I came to know, I learned a lot from you in regard to that. And how over time government efforts have changed. Of course, maybe you have not jot down here only climate and the disasters aspects. You have given much emphasis because much of this disaster is related to the prime earning source of the people, what we call the livelihood, that is agriculture. Because even in this pandemic also, the countries, Bangladesh, India, they are considering agriculture is the main savior, even if all other sectors, because marketing, industries, all are huge affected, even grossly affected, you can say, for which their GDP came down severely. Even Sri Lanka also in the southern nations, the South Asian nations, among them is, I think, almost on the top of this GDP reduction in the first quarter of the 2020, these situations. After Sri Lanka, I think India, the mostly affected. So Bangladesh has accommodated much and much more resilient in that respect. So, so they are also that how government policies over time change, whether at this time to save the agriculture because it is the severe to accommodate the people who lost the job in industries. Also, they are taking some steps. Okay, those things, if you have not, I think you can incorporate also afterwards, and it will be very, very much enriching also for us. And another thing that you mentioned, if we have a means a cross-country level some discussion, suppose an international level one conference we can organize jointly, either here or in Sri Lanka or anywhere else. So that will be much fruitful. And how these resolutions that come here through our discussions not only stay in the Google that research gate or anywhere, that is transmitted into the planning, it is incorporated. How we can force the government to hear the academicians and researchers, whatever they suggest, unless they have that influence in the political arena and others, that mechanism. So there also we can involve some of these influential people who have both academic as well as institutional connections, like either bureaucracies or in the politics. So they can help, I think. So Dr. Arjun can take note of that. So in all such discussions, if we can invite at least one such person who will understand these things and can convey this, that the general public or the academicians or the researchers are thinking in this line, that's government policies, these are the loopholes, or these are the good things that a government has done, but in the implementation, how it can be done in a much better way, so that people can take advantage and their welfare will be start way better in a better way, just like that. So I think we have come to the end, or any other questions if come from other participants. Dr. Arjun, otherwise you give a vote of thanks. If you have any question, you just tell, address.
I just wanted to add that our city Kolkata is really on the wetlands. And most of the researchers now have really looked into what ma'am is rightly suggesting for Sri Lanka, looking into the livelihoods of fisheries, aquaculture, you know, all agriculture and livelihood things. I think the most affected are the poor people having in this kind of informal livelihood situation, really depending on the natural resources. And ma'am has also highlighted that in Thailand and other Southeast Asian countries, now all the, even each house is becoming sort of with their garden, being self-reliant in terms of what they need, also a sustainable way, but also contributing what each person can do towards you know, adapting, mitigating climate change, and making their mark also, so that policymakers also become serious on these small successes also. Otherwise all the time big projects come and they take all the Right. So, but these small measures should be, I would say, very resilient, especially when those who are concerned. And I would really like to thank Professor Rekha Nianthi again for giving such a wonderful presentation and touching upon very pertinent issues. And Simi, would you like to give a vote of thanks?
By the way, Arjun, just I forgot to ask her.
Yes, sir.
Just one thing, that is in Bangladesh coastal area in Sundarban, or even in Calcutta also, Eastern Calcutta bypass, or that wetland that you are mentioning now. At that area, when there is any storm or that is tidal surge, you can see that salt water come inside. So those type of any disaster happens, simultaneously other disasters crop up there. That is epidemics at local level, like what we call that dengue, malaria, all this type. Whether in Sri Lanka also they face or not, those things.
Yeah, very much. Dengue is now simultaneously these days happening. So
No, that is a common. But
yeah.
when suppose there is a Ayla, that storm came in Sundarban area, and suddenly after that dengue surged or malaria surged, because water logging at many places take place, and
that is not
there is
happening.
another.
As I know, that is not happening because soon after storm surge comes, it is, I mean, decreasing. Not that much levels to go in that. Yes.
Because salt water issue,
Yeah,
so breeding, all these things.
So
Anyway,
I think good drainage also. Good drainage also, since it's
yeah, somewhat we have good drainage system. Yes.
Now in Bangladesh, Borishal and other areas, they face this problem another type differently. Anyway, operation that is after Fani's, that storm. Anyway, so Dr. Simi, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Professor De. It is my pleasure to formally propose the vote of thanks. I am so delighted and I'm so grateful to you, Professor Rekha Nianthi, for spending time and for your wonderful lecture. Of course, we have learned a lot, and as you've seen, questions and also remarks from the audience for providing such a wonderful insight into the whole concept of NDCs to climate change in Sri Lanka. I am very grateful to Professor Utpal K for taking up this conversation with Professor Nianthi. And on behalf of the South Asian Studies Center at Impact and Policy Research Institute, Counterview, our media partner, and also our organizing partner CDECS in Jaipur, I, along with Team IMPRI, I would like to thank Professor Rekha and all the audience watching us live on YouTube as well as on Zoom platform. We look forward to greater collaborations with you, ma'am, and we'll keep in touch with you over the proposed conferences and also upcoming seminars. Thank you very much again. Have a very good day.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Kumar and Utpal, my friend, Professor Utpal, and also Dr. Simi. Nice to meet you all, really. So we'll keep in touch with all kind of this kind of conference or whatever. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a nice day.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye. So have